start the timer. Thank you so much. Does anything change? Like, I remember something about the whole quality of... What was it exactly? Actually, I never saw that myself. I know it exists as a concept, like, some people actually suffer from that. But I never saw information when I used and I clicked any kind of link in terms of the whole. They share your information and they show your data or something like that. I never saw it happen on others when they sent a link I clicked. I never had that happen to me, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, I don't know. Is it real? Perhaps not yet, but we have to live terrified of the possibilities, so we shall assume that it is going to happen soon. So that we never actually commit the sin of posting a link without editing the URL to make sure that it doesn't contain any sensitive information or something like that. Anyways, wow, amazing. Today, why does it sound so crisp? Why does it sound so crisp? Amazing! Anyway, good morning. Here we are. Where is here? This liminal space of hours in which I come to stream. Yeah. Let me filter. I have to get a PNC. Color type transparent. There we go. Oh my god! A very pixel arted one, by the way. Is this pixel art? Yeah, this is actually pixel art. Save PNC. Where does here? Amazing! I have it on quick access. The right folder where those kind of things go and everything. Beautiful, beautiful. Prop. And now, what happened? I didn't change the name. That's what happened. Yeah. Unavoidably, if you forget to change the name of your files, they won't change their names themselves. Who could have seen that coming? There we go. We have this over here, and the only probable issue is that this is going to be like way too big to actually fit in OBS, in the cropped up source that I have. Let me see. OBS, hello, there we go. We have that, and now, also, important question. Where do we actually go in this game? Like, am I looking anything? No. Okay. I know exactly where I go now. Let me... Here. Capture. Don't capture Enlisted, because that's not what's open right now. Capture this. Okay, there we go. That. Now... Oh, what the fuck are you moving? I did an amazing job. I just undid the last change. I never expected that to happen, but yeah, I somehow did that. Wait a second. Move this over here. Rotate this PNC. Why is the microphone not working at all? Like, what's up with that? Excuse me? Do you have any explanation? Any explanation for that, friend? So, PNC. I might simply not be screaming, and that's making things clunky. Yeah, it's part of the experience, I guess. Can happen, pretty much. Now, I have like 1,000 tabs that I should close before starting. Not even because, thankfully enough, they like to optimize browsers nowadays. Not okay, I don't think actually they don't really like to optimize them. It simply happens that they understand that there are gonna be consequences with the users if they don't do that. So they go ahead and make sure that anything like a memory leak, because that's what I'm aiming at here. A memory leak doesn't exist, so it doesn't interrupt anything. Also, I thought the microphone was like not so loud, but it actually is. I had it like a back thought, a very absent idea. Maybe I am the problem. I have the issue. Not, it's not a real problem. Only me is what's suffering here. I don't think it's suffering exactly, but yeah, something along those lines. I was gonna mention an app, but I remembered that this app doesn't pay me, so we don't talk about applications in this house unless we're sponsored. No. It's I know I find it interesting actually, something about why are they doing this? For market research? For what? There is okay. We can talk about this without actually mentioning anything. Should we? Don't we? Shouldn't we instead save it for the future? Maybe. Something about delaying what matters in one way or another for the sake of nothing really. Simply delaying stuff for no real purpose whatsoever. That's how we live in this world. We're always moving from thing to thing, never addressing the one which truly possesses any importance or anything like that, condemned to move around and never have an discernment of what does matter. That is how we're bound to be. Blah. Also, I have. What's up with these, brother? What the fuck? Huh? Oh. What? What? There is what? A setting that says automatic announcement of chat reader? Something like that? Doesn't make any sense, yes? Whatever that is, we are ignoring that rule, that setting. Let me actually open the game. Also, it has sound, it has like noise. Do we want to utilize the noise of this game? It's an idle game, pretty much. So do we really need to have that exist in our life? Shall we really focus on having that noise present? Like, I feel like it's not really that meaningful. But anyway, good morning. Here we are. Also, I just realized something funny that happens very much because I can hear the rates and whatnot is there is double audio of that actually. Now that I think about it, that thing like capturing window audio instead of just the specific desktop audio. Sorry, instead of capturing the specific window audio, makes it so that whenever there is an alert of any kind, you actually have to hear it next to me a second time. I just realized that actually I'm amazing. I am professional streamer. But we ignore that, I guess. Anyways, good morning. It has been not so long, yesterday only, but yeah, we're back pretty much. After a tiny bit of consideration, I feel like yeah, today where instead of playing more Enlisted, we are gonna go ahead and do this and play this other thing called Seraph's Last Stand. Why? I don't know, man. I just wanted to actually do it. There is if you ask me why for most things I don't really have an explanation. I I believe I can actually identify one, but I prefer to not think that deeply about this stuff. Simply put, not reasoning is fun to some degree. To some other degree, it's slowly boring enough to actually become a butter or something. Do we really want the music from this? I don't feel like it's good. Like, oh my god, the sound designer from the game is going to come here and be like, what the fuck did you just say? Are you insulting my video game? Yeah, I am sorry, brother. I do actually not believe that it is something great or whatever. I like it, but not that much, you know? So, anyway, we are playing like that, and do not have so much silence. We're gonna do this, and here. There we go. We have some noise, you know. We are not in the void when it comes to in the absolute absence of things when it comes to audio, so it's minimally good. And yeah, TCM. What is TCM? Called Seraph's Last Stand. Basically, I feel like I wouldn't exactly say one of the best, but unavoidably one of the older games that came out for trying to imitate the whole roguelike genre, more like Vampire Survivor-esque and such. I don't know, it's quite strange. You will see. Simply put, you will see. It's not really that difficult to see for yourself, so yeah. There we go. So, why are we playing this? I don't know, I feel like I was actually thinking about not playing anything myself, but I ended up realizing, we're gonna try at least to have this much happening. It's good enough, and I feel like it's entertaining. Like, even for myself, it's something entertaining. There is always an struggle with some games are not really that interesting to even watch, but I could actually sit back and consider giving some time to watch whoever decides to play this. So that's how we ended up here. I feel like it's minimally good enough. I don't know. It has that strangeness to it of it's unavoidably. It also has some audio design behind it. Why did you actively choose to not include that? Sorry. My choices can sometimes be not so reasonable or whatnot, but does matter. Because yeah, this is compared to something like Enlisted, this is much easier to process through and whatnot. I don't actually have to devote any time to think what should be happening and such. I have already spent some hours playing it, so I do get to understand minimally what should be the next move and such. And I don't know. Point is, yeah, I had many things that I wanted to talk about. I guess I feel like, yeah, that's the most basic explanation. Not really much more. Simply that enough time has passed since the last occasion in which I really had one of these more focused streams, more appropriate streams, where the gameplay is not really the main thing. And yeah, I was trying to say then. I don't know. I guess not that I guess I do know. I'm quite happy with most things. I have slowly started to actually grasp again, reconsider how to progress in many things, focus, devote myself to thinking in one way or another to actual decisions that I feel like could be meaningful instead of just letting existence itself occur without any other thought. And I don't know, I have to admit, studying is as always, anyways hard, it's unavoidable to some degree. Studying will always be difficult, and I don't think I hope to one day just not have to study anymore. I simply do hope that at some point there is, currently I can say it like this, I feel like in many occasions it does occur that studying doesn't really entail any other aspect of complication to it. Like, I don't have to delve as deep in order to actually extract the proper ideas from things, but still there are still some notions and some ideas that end up having that aspect of holy moly, what an amazing discovery, what an amazing idea in itself this is, and how much of a complicated notion it is to fit within everything else. A new aspect to knowledge that comes with sometimes once you have already slowly established a solid foundation within what you grasp, there are still possible, what can you call them? I guess in this case it's not really that much of a wrong term. Alien pieces of knowledge, external pieces of knowledge, which become very much an influence, or which could, yeah, could become an influence. They are not entirely one, but they could become an influence. And to allow those things to then finally take shape in that way and such, and recognize the value of any piece of knowledge of that sort in that manner does carry with itself the difficulty of I can do it, but I still also need to modify many other things around the rest. Like, I don't know, what's a good example? If I believe, let's talk about video games. If I believe that my way of building, of going around how to play a game is the correct one, but to keep learning, I have to at some point realize, okay, how I thought that I had to play the game was actually wrong, and how I thought that I had to continue doing this thing was actually damaging to my goal. I need, therefore, to release from my current way of doing things this one view in order to then move to that different one that can somehow allow me to not have to focus anymore on what were my previous standards, and then thus obviously move towards this other method, this other way of thinking about stuff and such, and to do so, I don't think it is entirely acceptable as a word in this case, like, who can actually determine all the value of knowledge and such, but to minimally, properly, therefore move from one piece of knowledge to another one, you need to give up on the previous view and such, and sometimes it's actually difficult. Unavoidably, because there are a lot of factors that come into play in terms of, yeah, I don't know if I can entirely, willingly, coherently, I guess, also, admit, accept, interpret that how I used to go about things was not really that correct, how I used to go about certain notions was not acceptable, and yeah, I am pretty sure I have heard people categorize it under the whole Dunning-Kruger effect. It's not exactly that, but it can serve as a way to think about this very problem more quickly, more easily, more simply, more fastly, even even if it isn't exactly the right thing to utilize as an example and what's not in terms of this is not at all what happens. It has nothing to do with believing that you know it, or believing that your performance is going to be the one that you exactly end up getting out of things. You just have a handful of things that sometimes you need to examine to be capable of reaching proper conclusions and such. And when those conclusions that you try to bring forward don't all match up with how you believe about this thing, how you go about these notions, then you're going to have issues in terms of, unavoidably, you're going to encounter that the previously utilized method was not entirely correct, simply to say. But anyways, point is, yeah, and doing so now becomes a little bit more challenging. It's not entirely impossible. I feel like that is one of still the advantages of being quote unquote young, quote unquote mentally flexible and such, at the very least. Yeah. Okay, I can understand how this thing operates, and I can therefore adapt my view in order to, if this doesn't seem to be entirely true, then now go from a different perspective and try to talk about this in what I believe might be a more correct method, a more correct way of visualizing, of analyzing, of believing in this theory and such. And that comes with a lot of varying factors, I guess, certainly, yeah. A lot of mobility within things, a lot of uses, unavoidably, after, okay, this doesn't really make any sense, so we can move past this point on to the next one, and after doing that, we can therefore realize that, yeah, things weren't really going in a right direction, so moving in any good sense is useful and is unavoidably quite a desire. I will assume that everyone has. So yeah, it's great to have that happen. The only existent issue in a sense, anyways, is that, but sadly, it does take a lot of patience sometimes, because in the end, yeah, I can still realize sometimes that I'm not entirely sure of what I am trying to believe on. I am not entirely sure of what I am trying to have in mind and such, and at those moments in time, at those instances, it becomes quite a complicated question of, is this actually the right thing to go for? Is this actually the right thing to advocate for and such? But it's fun. It's anyways in many directions fun, because after all, it's still knowledge that ends up finding its different applications in reality, so not really something to complain, simply something to denote as a certainly interesting, weird place to find oneself in. Like, I don't know, I believe, I don't think it is an entirely correct theory, but I find it to be the case that more often than not, the way to mention all of these things simply is, yeah, it doesn't matter how you want to think out the stuff and whatnot, how you want to visualize these things and whatnot. You have no need to whatever analyze and try to think and try to, much less correct how you're approaching these questions and such. So, by being able of finally going back and doing so also comes with a lot of, I don't want to say humbling, because it's not exactly humbling, it's simply, it's basic knowledge. Like, if what I was thinking about and such before was not really that useful to me, then now I can move on from that, and by doing so, I can now then also continue in a more rigorous direction towards the goals that I have set. It's useful in the very end. At the very least, I gain quite a lot from actually working on this, so how to not be thankful for this? And yeah, that happening comes with a lot of, also, I will admit, certainly brain stuff in terms of, and unavoidably, now it doesn't feel as complicated to try to understand other things. Like, I don't know, I try to mention that, but I suddenly also don't really, I guess I can come up with a way of thinking about it, but it's not something it's not that it isn't real, it's simply that I don't find it anywhere else. Something about the reality that sadly in no place whatsoever you really encounter most of the time anything related to, okay, this other piece of knowledge that has nothing to do with what you're actually wanting to learn about does have its uses in the particular field which you are analyzing yourself, which you are dedicating yourself to, and such. And because this doesn't get mentioned as such at all, the norm becomes, yeah, so even if you want to, you don't have to. You should not worry about making sure that what you're learning about and what you are processing and such possesses or encounters has to deal with those qualities itself. Even if it's cool, you don't need to bring it to your mind. It's unimportant, simply put. So in reality, I do feel like there is quite a, I guess you could say, laterality of content unavoidably, of knowledge, more than just content, of knowledge. And to be capable of grasping how a certain thing functions can then later on allow you to create different varieties between other pieces of knowledge that you can always at a later time go back to, or unavoidably, if it isn't a later time, just from the very first time can finally give them a chance. And because this works in that way, you gain the benefit of saying, of being capable of stating that, yeah, now this actually is giving me some sort of help, some sort of benefit, some sort of something. And it tends to get painted as something quite unimportant, but no, I do actually have to admit it gets to have a lot of benefits, and trying to continue with that comes with a lot of, I wouldn't say that the disadvantages, simply, as always, time. I try to mention that whenever I can. Time is way too much of a factor that you don't really encounter mentioned. Like, unavoidably we are being affected by that, but at the same time, you don't really find people trying in any way whatsoever to even acknowledge that, yeah, sometimes we have to take such amounts of time in order to achieve certain things. Like, some days you might as well need to spend not just a handful of hours, or not some days. Certain goals might not require just a handful of hours, but rather a thousandful of them to finally lead towards the different things that you might be hoping for and such. And because this doesn't get acknowledged in any of those manners, because this doesn't get painted as anything with that sort of importance, then we can very easily believe that it doesn't really work in that way, it doesn't operate in that way, and that you don't have to worry if, or no, yeah, that it's fine to never think about it like that, let's say. And when then the realization finally comes of, what the fuck, why is this taking so long? How does this actually work? If nobody tells me that things of this sort take so long, I cannot really believe it, no matter what, that my way of approaching this question, of approaching this method, is the right one. Because if nobody else is really complaining about this thing, then it might as well mean that I am the only one actually having any kind of issue here. And when that becomes sort of the norm, sort of the established thing in terms of, yeah, it doesn't matter. You don't have to worry about how long it takes. You don't have at all to try to think, try to picture, try to anything. These things, in that way, it's all good, it's all fine. Once you finally get to actually say, but wait, do I really care? Like, or do I really not want this thing to go faster? Because you don't have to have that in mind. Because the message is always, this doesn't matter, don't worry about it. The moment in which you find yourself in that place of, what the fuck, why is this actually taking so long? You feel like it's too much of a strange sensation, too much of a personal problem, rather than an actual, real, existent problem that might occur not only to you and such. The whole, yeah, the unavoidable aspect of this is not just my situation, but rather something that other people also deal with and such. And sadly, because this becomes the case, this becomes the norm and such, it comes also with a lot of downsides. Sometimes to learn things, I might as well need multiple, not just multiple tries, but rather 100 or so attempts at finally grasping this idea until it finally happens, let's say. Yeah, and as it gets more and more pictured as something not real, something that nobody else gets to actually experience, then the final result becomes, what the fuck is actually going on? Why is this problem only present on me then, if that seems to really be the case? Why does no one else report the same, supposedly? And yeah, it comes with the price of having to actually sometimes deal with the realization that, no, actually this is fine that it takes long, but I sadly couldn't understand that myself, so I was trying to rush something that shouldn't be rushed for the sake of finally reaching a conclusion or something, and that much is actually quite sad, yeah. But I don't know, point is, it's all fine, basically. It's part of the experience, and it's part of the journey to finally get to realize how all of that works. At some point, one can finally admit, okay, yeah, this, even if no other person will admit that, I can realize that it is fine for this to take so long, and that it doesn't really matter that much that this takes this long for me. In the end, it's very much part of the experience itself to see stuff have such a delay until, or so, yeah, such gaps of time until I can finally reach this other conclusion and be capable of admitting this other piece of it and such. But again, the normal way of working, of going around that, is not really to say, yeah, this, all of this is fine. No, it always circles around the idea of, you don't have to worry about that yourself. What the fuck? I can just loop through the screen? What the fuck is that? Huh? We can actually do that. Huh? Like, as long as I don't hit an enemy, okay? I see. Anyway, and I was saying, and I don't know, I feel like it's then unavoidably somewhat strange to have to come down from that sensation and say, yeah, it's all fine, it's all fine. It's all understandable, no matter what. Because once again, in the end, the message is not really that it is fine or that it is bound to be like that. The message lies somewhere else, along the lines of, no, you have to worry, you have to make sure that you utilize as much time as you can in worrying out this thing that you yourself seem to be struggling with. But, life sometimes is about also having those changes in opinions and such that even if the rest cannot really mention in any way, they don't really kill you, so as long as you can admit them, you're gonna be very good. And so, therefore, very happy about that final result. Also, yeah, I seem to actually be capable of just by looping around, getting not multiple, an even bigger explosion. I picked up something that was like, for every single time that you loop around, you get a bigger explosion. Not exactly for, you create an explosion equal to the amount of airtime that you have, let's say. But it's fine, I guess. Anyway, I was saying. And so, yeah, having slowly returning to that is quite, not just charming, but quite entertaining also. Quite fulfilling. There in this, okay, I tried to mention something like that and I actually deviated from that part of the message. One of the actually huge issues that I find occurs way too much in relation to all of these things is, sadly, in the academical world, more than anything else, you get very drilled into your mind that, yeah, it doesn't matter how you actually want to think these things through and whatnot. If we tell you that this operates in this manner, and if we go around and try to drill into you that this is what is going to happen, you should never look at any other of the options available out there or anything like that. And in that sense, the curriculum of things that you have to study because it can get very, very much incredibly limited to a very handful of things that, while they are unavoidably useful in the field, they are not the most useful pieces of it, or they also have the characteristic of they are useful, they are unavoidably useful, but sadly they aren't entirely capable of just solving all the issues that you might have. You might know, let's say like this, as an engineer, you learn how to do basic things. That doesn't make you a very proficient engineer who can take on contracts that might require you as a civil engineer to build entire roads and bridges towards other places. You have the very in specific places of the world. You have the very basic notions to be capable of operating on the most simple realm, but to be capable of actually operating in the rest of it, in the more diverse parts of the universe and such, you need to continue deepening your knowledge and such, and that doesn't really get presented as a necessity of any sort. That doesn't really get tagged as a thing that you should worry about and such. And I believe it can very much be quite damaging to actually let that happen time after time. Because in the end, there are some things that you might as well want to actually be capable of solving properly. So getting to continue learning also comes with that benefit, even if I don't feel like that one is actually talked about in any space. Sadly, the acquisition of knowledge is not just slept on in terms of, we tend to ignore that, but also completely disregarded in most spaces, I feel like. So even if you wanted to, in terms of, I have to continue with this and such, you're not gonna hear that message in most places. That's not gonna be what gets fomented or shared or discussed. There are other priorities much more present than that particularly. But yeah, we are not out the critique of the general system. We are just out what I'm personally trying to do recently, and yeah. Therefore, I will be quite happy with that. And I don't know, I will continue to try to make sure that that keeps on happening for as long as it can keep happening. And I don't know, trying to also create every time your projectiles pass through an enemy projectile, it gets more powerful. First time I actually see that upgrade, I think like actually I didn't even say anything, but somehow I got a run out of nowhere. I think, yeah. Basic explanation. I have a hat that lets me simply attack. No, that gives me a possibility of getting multiple upgrades from choosing an upgrade. Multiple times the same upgrade from choosing certain, not certain, for whenever I choose an upgrade, a possibility. And somehow it triggered on the 2 cards that it needed to trigger to get me like one of the best combos, and that's how we ended up actually having the possibility of seeing me get more and more powerful. Even if I didn't choose any other upgrade, I will still be getting more powerful every passing round, because yeah, that's how this is operating right now. But anyways, continuing. And I don't know, I feel like it's going to be an interesting journey. I have been also unavoidably trying to focus a lot on, okay, and what are the other things that I might need to be present in order to keep on progressing when it comes to stuff that I'm trying to learn about and such, and unavoidably, it's quite interesting to see how some things don't really seem to get any piece of recognition yet. By understanding them, once again, other aspects of life become far more understandable and such, and trying to have that occur more and more is unavoidably good, but also exhausting. That is what I can actually admit, that it feels the most exhausting, at least to me. I don't know. I guess other people don't really have that much of an issue thinking about that themselves. But for me, yeah, there are. Whenever it actually happens, that for some reason, no matter what, you will have to waste so much time learning and relearning and such some things as a fundamental notion. It sounds great, but it also comes with the added weight of it sounds minimally good enough, but in reality it's not really that great. I how many times am I going to have to go back to certain notions until I finally extract everything from them? It's something about the surprisingness of realizing how stupid one really is. Because you assume that you get the meaning of certain things. Then, okay, finally, you do try hard. There's absolutely nothing. What the fuck are you talking about? Amazing operator. Oh yeah, and I was saying absolutely amazing operator. And yeah, it's sadly also occurs that therefore unavoidably you have some stuff that you might believe you finally understood in the present, but then you come back to it and realize, it's not entirely something that I actually did grasp. So in this second go, I actually get many more layers that I used to ignore before. And, well, unavoidably, it is fine to have the possibility of having that happen. It also is quite surprising to see it anyways, because you wouldn't really expect for you to not be... You wouldn't have expected, when you first reach the end of a book, you don't expect that you, on your second go, will get so many more layers. Unavoidably, that's what tends to happen with most readings, with most experiences of reading and such, in terms of, yeah, I have finally realized that this is yet another piece of media in which I assumed, quite wrongly, that I had grasped all the possible messages, while in reality, there were still many other things that I did ignore, that I should have tried to appreciate and such, and by not having given myself the chance to actually appreciate all of these things, all that I did was simply miss out on the not final, but simply deeper interpretation. And now that this keeps on occurring, like, one of the funny things, for example, one of the unavoidable aspects of this is I have to keep on studying many other readings that I have to go through, entail going back and forth between different books. An unavoidable part of learning is learning how to not exhaust yourself in the process of learning in itself, because in the end you're unavoidably going to find yourself quite tired some days by certain readings. So to properly allocate time into the things that will exhaust you the least also comes with the price of, but if what you are learning from right now at a later instance, when you revise it, or let's say like this, you move from this thing A that you're reading to thing B, you keep on hold, like let's say you were reading up to 50% of it, thing A, and you move to thing B, while it has its usages, it also comes not with a negative downside, but it also lets you, once you return to A, see that maybe you weren't really on the 50%. Perhaps what you actually ended up having in your hands was something along the lines of simply 30%, or even if you did, like, physically speaking, not so metaphorically, but physically speaking, you had read it through or up to the 50% of book A, you go towards book B. And when you return to book A, you realize that on that 50%, there were more pieces of knowledge that you could have understood, that you could have extracted and such. In all of that happening, in all of that occurring, you end up with the final realization of, wow, surprisingly then, that does mean that I have a lot more to actually keep on trying and keep on attempting when it comes to this and when it comes to the stuff that I should be paying attention to and such. And that doesn't mean anything bad in itself, but simply unavoidably comes with the downside, I guess, of, and if you end up not really paying attention to that, if you end up not really focusing on how you're acquiring things, you're going to unavoidably encounter it at some point or another that, yeah, you're learning, but not so deeply, not so thoroughly, and now that you're returning to this, you will keep on seeing many more layers of knowledge available within what you're exploring, or many more. There is something that happens. It's a very basic theory. Like, I feel like unavoidably, it's very much well known in the world in terms of how widely utilized it is. Something that happens with the field of literature is the death of the author. The concept, basically put, is what you extract, what you interpret out of something is not in itself what the author exactly meant. But it isn't always negative. Sometimes, because your knowledge allows you to create different pieces of scaffolding to other similar mediums, you end up actually with a realization that could, in one way or another, maybe challenge, maybe talk with other pieces of things that were not so directly expressed anywhere else. Also, I think I need to actually deactivate particle effects, because somehow this game is fucking lying, and that's amazing. Like, I didn't even know that was possible. I think I never had any, at least unavoidably, not a game as silly looking as this one lag on my PC, so yeah, quite crazy to actually see this one do so. Absolutely crazy. But it's part of the fun, I guess, I know. Let me wait. FPS, okay. OBS so far seems to not be lagging, even if the game itself does lag. Like, who knows? I guess it's part of the experience. We shall calculate it as such and move ahead. Ignore whatever is happening in relation to that. So yeah, moving on. And I was saying then, so when you end up encountering that, therefore unavoidably, I do have quite a lot of stuff to have in mind. I do end up having a lot of things to try to picture, try to have a present and such, and this doesn't exactly come with a downside in terms of, oh wow, it's so sad that this is the case, but unavoidably it comes with the price of, and unsurprisingly, you do have a lot of things that you want to make sure you're extracting, at the very least, in the moment in which you're exploring them, the most that you can. It doesn't matter if in the future you can return to them and extract even more currently that you're giving it your best. And that makes learning quite tiring in terms of unavoidably. We assume that we're good, but in the process of trying to extract that goodness, to materialize that goodness, you do have to sacrifice a lot of yourself to make sure that you don't wrongly interpret something that might have had yet another avenue for you to still distill yet another piece of knowledge. And it's fine. In the end, it's very much fine. It doesn't matter as much, but it is still challenging. Like, it's taxing, let's say, unavoidably taxing to have to accept, to have to admit that, yeah, you know what, this way in which I thought about these notions is not all that useful for me. So by having to change this, now we can finally then realize that, okay, then this other way to go about that might as well be more useful. Also, Am I slowly dying? What's happening? Is my healing not capable of keeping up with all the damage that I take, I guess? How? Fuck? Do they have like some sort of aura or something that makes me... Not aura, I guess. Effect on hit where their damage makes so much more damage to me than what I actually expected that, yeah, it actually can very much kill me, I guess. Amazing. Wasn't expecting that. Anyways. Also, how much bleeding do I have? I know I have a substantial amount of it, but how much is a substantial amount of bleeding? Well, no. Bleeding? What is bleeding? This one. I have 4. So I apply 4 bleeding every single hit. Okay. And anyways, so returning to the point. But anyways, I say it's actually lagging so much when I move the entire mass of enemies, it's crazy. But whatever, I was trying to go for the point that, yeah, in the end, it ends up very much being one of the most useful things anyways. Even if it is Tasman, all of that, it's me just purely complaining about something that happens in a way in which I wasn't expecting myself, but which still reports most of the benefits on in this very same process. Like, after all, to be capable of extracting all of those conclusions is beautiful. To be capable of seeing the layers of knowledge and such behind the things that I try to keep on understanding is ultimately beneficial for me. But it never stops being still surprising. Like, there is a lot of the process, let's say, is annoying by default because you will always encounter something that directly counters your perception of, okay, today I do believe, I do understand this thing well enough. No, tomorrow you finally wake up, you have that eureka moment and realize, okay, so this wasn't all of it. This wasn't all of what I was actually, or all from the thing that I have been focusing on. So that means that I will therefore have to get, even now, try to find another way to go about this and such. And I realized that I was wrong yesterday. How can I be entirely sure that what I did today was good enough? And that's where it actually gets difficult. But it's fine, I guess. It's part of the experience in the way in which we just learn to let that happen. No matter how many times it has to happen, it's going to be part of the thing itself. It's going to be an unavoidable situation. You're going to have to believe that what you said today was enough, even if tomorrow you wake up and realize, no, it actually wasn't. But it's good. It's simply good. And so, yeah, all of that is to say, to justify that, yeah, I have been trying to therefore continue learning a little bit, if nothing else. And it has been quite interesting. Quite a lot of the things that I did see come with... Oh my god, it's lying so much! I think, partially, most certainly, one of the problems is also the bleeding, for sure. I think we're hitting... I don't have an FPS counter, and this game doesn't have a native one, but if I had to guess, we're probably hitting like up to, I don't know, 15 frames when it actually lags as much as it can suddenly. Yeah. But it's part of the experience, so don't worry. Also, I like how there is a possibility to actually get an incredibly big explosion, yet somehow I seem to not have at all the possibility. Okay, there we go. Finally trigger that thing. But otherwise I cannot really get that to happen at all. But whatever. Are we here to focus simply on the gameplay? No. And so, with that said, I don't know. I'm very happy with that. I feel like it's very good, and it simply is again a matter of patience, because in the end, a lot of learning has a lot to do still with. And tomorrow I will return to what I was thinking about yesterday. What, or I say it as if it happens one day to another one, when sometimes it's literally I return in the evening or during the night to what I was thinking about in the morning, and I encounter yet another avenue in which I could improve on that and such, and that's substantial. In terms of improvements, that's the best thing to have happen to one. So certainly glad for that, even if it is still annoying that it occurs in terms of fuck. I don't really know if I want that to exactly occur in terms of. I would rather not have that happen. I would rather have the conclusion, the final conclusion, be finally reached. But if it has to, oh my god! I kicked the enemy out of bounds. I am amazing. I just soft lock myself? I have a method to kill this guy. Amazing. Thank God. We have the explosions here. The explosions and bleeding. Most certainly it would kill with the bleeding if I have to do it. Also, can I just stay still now? Yeah. We reached that point in time which I don't even need to press anything to win. Good. But yeah, I was saying. And so, I don't know, I find it still, anyways, strange to actually have to have that in mind. The continuing to progress with learning has become quite a strange adventure nowadays. Because trying to go back to the other factor that I mentioned before, it still comes with the added side of subtly. You don't really see it being mentioned as such in most places. You don't really see it discussed in that way in any area of the social environments in which we inhabit, in which we end up being placed on and such, in terms of, yeah, even if you have to operate like this, you won't get told that this is what's going to happen. You're just going to be thrown out there, and if you reach this conclusion yourself, good luck. If you don't, good luck also, because there is not going to be any kind of factor that actually lets you. I died. I died for staying still too long. Can happen. How? Okay. I have an actual question. How do people keep on progressing? I can only buy like 2 upgrades from each upgrade. That's a slide. Out of nowhere, I got so many upgrades into some things. Amazing. But even then, this is not like actually enough, you know. How do people actually reach something like around 400? I feel like probably something that you can do only if you stay, wait, incredibly long in the very playing, simply. Like, as long as you don't really try to do anything else, but keep the game open and whatnot, maybe you can get something like 600 rounds or such. But otherwise, pretty much impossible to get that to happen. But it's fine, who cares? Oh, anyways, I was sick. But yeah, I don't know. Now that I am more than anything else trying to let that happen by itself, I feel like things are slowly taking color on it, and it's always somewhat difficult to get to fully grasp how one should move under such conditions and whatnot. After all, the continuous reevaluation of things leads to the conclusion that not many of the conclusions themselves that I end up having are that accurate. So while I need to believe on things, I also encounter that me doing so might as well lead me to me creating any sort of bias that I could not have within me. I could not allow within me. I could simply ignore. But it's part of life, I guess. So we simply let that be, and whatever comes out of that is fine in itself, I guess. And yeah, um, simply to say that it's all good. I guess it's fun. It's fine. It's fun. It's interesting. It's many things all at once, and all of what it gets to be is good. So for now, we do whatever we can. And so yeah, with that said, I don't know. I think I'm done with that point. Basically, simply to try to admit that yeah, continuing to therefore learn for more things of this sort is, besides the challenging factor, unavoidably interesting still. Like, let's see where the next conclusion can appear and what's not. Now, it taking finding soy in the mere factor that yeah, this is being enabled yet again, because at times this I feel like unavoidably the most basic aspect of these kind of notions. But yeah, at times you don't really feel like it needs to happen at all. That you need to think about what might be the object of attention for you in any way. So you end up letting whatever particular notion that you should, that you, this is a piece of theory that I don't really share that much in terms of, I find it incredibly cryptic. But yeah, the whole aspect of, I know I have these things that I should focus on, so by me actually focusing on those particular things, I get to then allow the other stuff that I know doesn't matter as much to not take such a place in my life. But the temptations presented by those other much, yeah, much less interesting things in the long run is more attracting in the moment, in that instant in which I encounter them. So I do get persuaded to pay attention to those other things, partially because yeah, unavoidably the whole eternal discussion of oh wow, are you weak-willed and whatnot? Maybe to some degree, maybe. After all, I know that I shouldn't be doing something like that, yet it still happens. So what do you believe is gonna be the right conclusion? To simply say no, possible. That cannot be the case. Or to rather admit that yeah, whatever happened with this thing, it is quite strange and it is quite absurd in its current form. So I will try to focus on not letting that be anymore what goes on for now. No, the easier, the faster answer lies in even if this is a problem, we can still live with that, and it's all good. That it, or it's not really something that we shall worry about. But yeah, it's fun. Anyways, it's life remains very interesting, and any of the other aspects of this related to the whole notion of and trying to capture what might as well be then finally something worth going for, and such gains many more other nuances that were very much unavailable before, unrecognizable. The convictions that a person can hold only get solidified the moment in which the person can far more appropriately realize what makes any of those convictions still remain existent in their life, not because we're bound to always have convictions in terms of, yeah, you're bound to have a bias or whatever, but simply because the understanding of what is the thing that you want lets you therefore move towards that very same object of desire with far more intentionality, and unavoidably even more so in the case in which you get the probability, the benefit, the chance of seeing also those other things which not only do you want, but also you do know that you certainly can utilize on the pursuit of this particular object of desire. Like, unavoidably, because I get to see how this can be of use to me, or besides the mere factor that I can see how this can be of any kind of use to me, I can also observe how, even if it doesn't directly address what I want, it allows a more swift acquisition of what I want. Like, what would be a good example? I don't know, I wanted to have a pet, and it's not directly related, but if I learn or if I can finally acquire something like a proper soul to have my pet, then my acquisition of a pet will be much swifter. It's not directly related, but unavoidably, you cannot negate in its entirety the relationship to it in terms of some part of an effect that it does have with your goal of the pet in itself, right? So yeah, having that occur is quite fun and quite interesting in many ways, I feel like. But yeah, just trying to keep on going with that sensation, with that part of life. For now, I don't know. Currently, I am still very much amazed by the tranquility of all of this. I can say that it is quite nice to still have this be very chill. I I am amazed. Some of the most actually of the theory that you learn about seems to be absurdly complicated at some point. Like, it's not exactly a theory of knowledge, but something adjacent to it will be knowledge in itself. The further you go towards these more modern times, these or more current times, the closer you are to far more complex ideas, which unavoidably in themselves do have a lot of things that make them feel quite abstract and whatnot. And because this is so, because this is almost bound to be how things of this sort operate, it feels then surprising to encounter to see to realize that wow, so this is in a way, in one way or another, certainly a surprising renewal of the perspective that I was trying to have about this thing and such. And as long as that keeps happening, no, I missed the point. Sorry, the point is also along the lines of, and the more modern ideas also come with they are good. I mean, I'm not trying to say that they aren't good, but the whole aspect of the complication of them does bring forward the question of, but how much do you actually have to understand everything else to finally reach this more modern stuff, which seems to be idolized and presented as the precious thing and whatnot somewhere else and such. And yeah, sadly, there is quite a lot of reading to do forward, and I don't know, as always, I try to bring conversations here that might be in any way useful, and when I was thinking about it the other day, I realized, yeah, it will pretty much be impossible to actually have that happen otherwise, in terms of if we really allowed the conversations to, what's the proper word? Complicate, not exactly the word, but something similar enough. Complicate the topics of discussion enough to actually make them reach these more newer ideas is not really the only pathway towards those conversations. I feel like sadly, this is a very personal opinion in that sense, but yeah, sadly, it seems to be the case that the way in which notions of the more current times are generate. It's fine that they rely on other things, but it doesn't mean that it was all. They could only have existed thanks to these other pieces of media or knowledge and whatnot. It's at least in the areas in which I delve. Like unavoidably, we are not talking with a biologist or with a neuroscientist or anything like that. We are talking with somebody who tries to talk about philosophy, who tries to talk about psychology, who tries to talk about social sciences in general. And in that field, thank God, it's not the same as the more natural, strong sciences and such. Because yeah, here we don't have to worry so much about the other foundations and similar. And in that sense, it is what it does feel quite an absurd proposition that yeah, you have to actually have all of that other backlog to then finally be capable of saying something of value, to then finally be capable of expressing or of showing anything of importance. If you don't have that, you will never reach a place in which the things that you show, the things that you talk about, the things that you present are going to be important. I feel like that's not so much of an actual requirement here. And, notably, partially grateful for that, but also the more basic aspect. Sadly, it's not really so much of an important thing. It's surprising to see how much I do have to read to how much that's particularly more pertaining to certainly my personality. I like to read what informs other authors and such, and in doing so, then you can finally reach conclusions that would have otherwise remained unavailable simply because the authors themselves don't really acknowledge their previous influences and whatnot. So, by then finally being capable of admitting the existence of this, the whole journey becomes much faster, much quicker, much more swift, and much more performable in itself, I guess, yeah. Otherwise, it will always live only as a thing that exists as a possibility, but not really something that you do want to have happen. Like, I'm gonna devote myself to learning so much. I know I can, but I don't really want to. I don't need to, simply put. So why should I even bother with that? If after all, it's not really so much of an obligation anyways. But yeah, point is, the future remains as promising as before. The only thing I don't know is that's the eternal issue of and how to not allow procrastination to enter these kind of conversations and whatnot. Realize, accept what needs to be done when it truly needs to be done and such. Because unavoidably there are going to be times in which you're gonna be like, oh well, you know what, this thing will rather be what I deal with than this other piece. And in the field of knowledge, it is amazing actually to see how much this does exist. There are some notions that they get presented as something absurdly important, absurdly necessary, absurdly meaningful in so many ways that you could never figure out entirely why you have to learn about them so much. But you have to, there is no question you have to. And because this keeps operating like, I died so early? What the fuck can happen, I guess. Also, I like how this guy, unavoidably, is, I don't know if this is cheating or is this like the maximum positive integer reachable in 64 bits. I don't know that. Don't we have access to internet for moments like this one actually? Let me see. bit. 2 million? Yeah, 2 million. No, 2,147,483,000. 2 million? No, 2,147,483,000 1,647. So that guy somehow reached the maximum possible integer the scores somehow. Amazing. Anyways, yeah. I don't know. Another run. It's good. Yes, please. Don't surrender yet, brother. What the fuck? I have auto shooting enabled from the very beginning. Amazing. And so yeah. Anyways, I was saying, I don't know. I feel like it's, despite the strangeness of it, it is still quite positive to keep on moving forward with all of that. It doesn't feel real sometimes to see so many doors still opening, but I guess, yeah, I think about it as the world does have a tendency towards negativity that might as well entirely be detrimental to the person who believes that it is worth hearing anything of that sort. But in reality, things are quite amazing, quite good. Not just amazing, quite good most of the time. And thanks to that, it is that we end up with many more possibilities than what we can actually realize sometimes. And yeah, in the action of trying to have that be present more, to continue to work towards desires, goals, and such of any kind, not just of this particular type, but of any kind. It is that I end up in the conclusion that yeah, it's fine. We simply have to. I wouldn't say power through. I feel like it's too much of a word used more than anything else for the whole idea of you must power through. It's so unbearable, but you must power through. It's more about the aspect of it's unavoidable that sometimes the populi refers to things in manners that aren't that productive, that capable of bringing anything forward that's useful for the people, but it's useful anyways to still see, despite the common stance towards things, what can actually work for yourself, simply put. And yeah, it's quite challenging no matter what. Unavoidably, no matter what, it's quite challenging anyways. The whole concept of yeah. You have to try to challenge the perspectives that you get presented with, and such is amazing, but also a little bit overwhelming, I guess. There are it's in that sense, it does have a lot of difficulties behind it in terms of, but how do you actually know that what you are challenging is the meaningful thing to challenge and whatnot? Sometimes this realization is one that I have in not so recently, but yeah. Sometimes you can actually go out and when you see somebody say something that you know can have a direct counter argument presented to it, that can happen. But do you really need to have that happen? That's the real question. Because sometimes at this point, life becomes a lot more measured in terms of, I don't know if I really want to. It sounds unavoidably, if I heard it from a different person, it might as well sound incredibly egotistical and narcissistic in terms of I have to choose my battles a little bit more cautiously because I don't want to exhaust my energy so much with those who don't want to actually talk about things. But rather, the reality is that sadly, sometimes to simply prove something, to simply bring something forward, you might as well have to waste way too much time in trying to make that happen than in anything else. Because sadly, that's something that I feel like sadly philosophy doesn't really get to entirely understand. No matter how much of a good idea you have, how much of a good argument you have, if the person is strong-headed about something, completely bent on making what they say be the truth and nothing else, good luck on changing that, brother. Good luck on changing the mind of that person, you yourself. It's bound to pretty much remain as what they said and not much else for now, so you can go out of your way to make that happen, but that won't really make the thing itself change. In many cases, there is no. The reality is, you can make that happen, but you need to invest so much energy that I personally choose to not to. So yeah, it has become quite a distancing experience, I guess, unavoidably. After all, there are things that matter, but not that much. I don't want to spend so much time on trying to make sure that you are with me sometimes. I don't really feel like it's so meaningful. But I don't know. It's also same reason as to why that sounds minimally good. It's why it is to some degree quite dangerous. I feel like unavoidably, if you allow that to be the present notion, the present thing, when you try to drive yourself around existence, and you forget that. But sometimes you also do have to push quite a lot for certain things, quite fiercely for others to actually realize things. You every single day, I choose to not take on certain battles, and at the end of the week, I might have, when I look back, finally realize that some of them I could have actually had, and some of them could have actually been useful. Not every single one of them is entirely meaningless and entirely unproductive, but some of them actually lead to results that I do want, and that I will cherish if I have in my hands. Even if right now I am only capable of expressing as meaningless and such, there are things that I do want to happen, and by forgetting, like, what would it be? By automatizing the process of, yeah, this doesn't matter, it's not necessary for us to have a conversation about this doesn't matter, it's not necessary to have a conversation about this doesn't matter, it's not necessary, continuing, so on and so forth, for so much of life. At some point you're going to encounter that, I am quite sure that I actually didn't want to discard this one conversation, but I did so I did to some degree screw myself over thanks to that. And at least the human quality of returning to what you really wanted and such is still present. You can still try to somehow have what you want to happen and such, and avoid having the issue of, fuck, I missed this thing that I knew I for so long desired and similar. But at other times, unavoidably, you're going to anyways miss, and try to eradicate or reduce the possibility of missing as much as possible is still challenging, no matter what. Life is founded on different challenges that we will have to navigate, and to act like they will never be present is quite ridiculous in nature, because they will always be there no matter what. So, at the very least, we can do a minimally good job at admitting that they will loom around, and whenever they present themselves to us, just try to make sure that, yeah, whatever they get to be is not something that we end up being angry about, let's say. But yeah, besides that, I don't know, stuff. It also, I feel like it's the most obvious aspect of all of that, yeah, getting to understand more properly things always allows you to then return to what you said you wanted and such, and have a more proper stance in terms of, but am I sure that I want these things so much? Am I sure that I have such a, I don't know if it is exactly a necessity, I just don't feel like it is so important for me anymore. Now that I have a, more so at least in philosophy, you get a lot of conversations about morality and the moral things and whatnot, in terms of, unavoidably, you're going to talk about stuff that leads you towards the analysis of, okay, this thing that we get in our hands now, is it really that meaningful, or is it more meaningful simply because I want to say that it seems to matter, not because I'm all that convinced that it has any sort of importance for me? I just want to get rid of this current conversation and move on to something else. and not just in the evaluation of morality and moral norms and such, in the more basic aspect of sometimes I do actually have to consider my things in a manner in which I do not damage what I care about. And in doing so, in that process, it comes to light the realization that sometimes it is quite challenging to actually have that happen in its entirety. Sometimes it is quite difficult to actually allow that to be the case. Because after all, I am not so sure some days of what I want, and if I gain even more tools to perform this task, now I have to even more necessarily so return to the analysis of this very question, and I am quite unwilling to do so. Life is good, but I am not so willing to admit certain things, no matter how beneficial they would be for me and such. And in that encounter, it is that unavoidably one ends up with fuck. But it's going to be first rule, I guess. It's going to be entirely fine to do that, even if it seems to not be the most optimal thing to have happen. It is absolutely good to let that be, rather than to just never solve things. A reevaluation is more useful. Like, in that sense, you can actually say the sinking ship fallacy, the whole aspect of I have utilized so time into this thing that I don't know what will be next now that I'm doing something wrong. That is quite true. Like, it is still. What's the proper word? It can still be absolutely fear-inducing to realize that what you did didn't really mean that much, and that what you got out of the things that you did didn't really lead to the results that you hoped for. But it is better to be capable of doing that as early as possible rather than to waste so much time. Sometimes we're bound to be entirely tied to our previous beliefs, to our previous ideas and notions and such. And even if that happens, it's not so necessary to still remain as equally strong-headed about stuff. Some days you can actually have proper opinions about things that you truly will realize, okay, didn't really matter that much, no matter what I chose. The choice which I got was in the end the one that I quote-unquote wanted, so, or the one that I can admit aligns the most with myself. Even if my previous persona had to die, like, how to say it? Something along the lines of, it's, yeah, I don't think it is the proper language, but if I have to kill my previous version to finally be capable of then becoming what I really am meant to be, it needs to happen, even if it doesn't sound that great in theory. In practice, it's much more useful to have that occur than to never let anything of that sort be the case. After all, there are so many things to be grateful for when that happens that I should make sure this is present. Not that this never at all happens. There are many things that go to waste if I don't let this even be the case. So yeah, working on that, simply put, and trying to just keep on let that occur more. And I don't know, there is a piece there about shedding the previous things that didn't really have any kind of importance whatsoever, shedding the other things that one tends to believe matter in any way, and then when you come down and realize, okay, did this actually have any kind of impact on my existence and whatnot? And you have to admit, no, yeah, it didn't really do much, it didn't really bring anything forward, it didn't really change anything or anything like that. It's whatever, man. It was very much a rather whatever. I can now then do truly what I want. It always gets painted only as a tiresome thing, because after all, there is this fear of discovery of what one truly is when it comes to the person and the personalities that we possess and such. But I feel like unavoidably, it's much better to have that happen than to, as always, no? Realize that only very late, live an entire life in a lie which you never truly cared for and such. The more basic language of regret, I guess, if you want to have some sort of tag to tag about it. So yeah, having slowly working towards this myself feels quite nice, and I don't know. I guess just trying to continue have that occur myself, and we'll see where all of this leads to. For now, simply happy that it is happening at all. Because, yeah, I feel like sadly, as always, there are many times in which I look around and I feel like that's what happens in most cases anywhere near me. Existence. The world is quite a magnificent place. The invention, the creation, the possibility, the access to internet allows you to be around so many other universes, so many other lives, not just in the more basic sense of, yeah, I have my life, you have your life, but in the simple sense of, well, my things go on and such. The things that happen in your life are so different from mine that, unsurprisingly so, there are so many differences between what is your existence and what is my existence. There are so many more pieces of distance, or yeah, no, that's not exactly the word. Something about getting to truly see that, yeah, what matters for me is not at all what matters for you, and getting to have what matters for me exist, no matter how much you truly seem to not really possess anything of that same sort you yourself, is to some degree surprising, because after all, I don't know, the illusion sort of is, yeah, we can all work on our things and whatnot, and sometimes when you realize that, what the fuck, why does nobody else truly care about these things, then it does feel a little bit strange to, again, look around and see, nobody really cared about this sort of stuff. Nobody really had any kind of interest on this sort of thing. It was always something bound to be present only in this very select few or something like that. But it is whatever. That's how we go. So, as long as anything that happens keeps on operating minimally well enough in terms of, yeah, and this keeps improving, it's all fine. No matter how many people are actually behind it, in terms of if it is 1 or if it is 50 people or if it is a million people. Sometimes, not always rather, dreams need to be followed by the entirety of humanity. I am quite happy about that fact, and it's good. So yeah, returning to then what I was saying before. No, the future is still quite uncertain in many other ways, but all that it might be in that sense still remains quite interesting in the very sense that, it's good. It's all good. It is whatever, and it shall remain whatever, and we are bound to let it be whatever also. We cannot truly go out of our way to change so much of reality, no matter what, so if it has to be whatever, then we shall let it be whatever. Also, I think I should try to roll a little bit more for stuff that I actually care for. But that is also whatever. I don't know. I'm barely paying attention to the video in many ways. And yeah, as I was saying, for now, working on things, working on life, I guess, working on existence. And it will keep on being the case for quite a long time. I don't know. The only thing I only can okay, there is one actual mission inside all of that. I am quite surprised. Like I find it not only surprising in terms of how wow this doesn't happen in others whatever, but also quite annoying in terms of why the fact does nobody actually want to mention it as an actual thing. It's quite unnecessary to have the capacity to recognize sometimes that yeah, things will take a lot of time because of this very same factor. It will be incredibly long until some things can happen, and this might as well be like this entire process and whatnot might as well be much longer than what I ever anticipated before. So there's certainly to some degree good, but to some other degree unsurprisingly so. Unsurprisingly so, it will take quite a long time until we see some things. And I don't know. I guess to predicate, let's say like that, yeah, to predicate patience is quite difficult, anyways. The world doesn't really. I feel like yeah, it doesn't come from an entire place of actual care. Whenever most of the time I get told that I need to be patient, it's quite difficult to actually see and counter out there anything related to patience that does feel true in its value in terms of I understand why I am being told this. Not really. In most cases, it comes rather with this weight of yeah, you know, you have to be patient. You know, you have in mind that you have to be patient. You keep present to yourself that you have to be patient. It's more of a scolding type of saying than anything else, and that does feel quite bad, sadly. Not sadly, unavoidably, rather. It's part of life. It's bound to be fucking annoying how we'd like to talk about it and such. So yes, it's. I try to make it out the good, quote unquote good, kind of patience, but sadly that's not what we are bound to hear around us most of the time, so excuse me, I guess. Simply bound to be what happens. Simply bound to be what we see. And all of it is fine, anyways. But yeah, I don't know. As I said before, basically, then yeah, it will be quite a long journey for now. All of this is quite routed. Is it a nice word? I don't think so. I don't think it is the correct one in terms of yeah. It is slowly taking more and more direction. I feel like it's fine. Simply put. Yeah. For now, we can all that we can say rather is yeah, let it be whatever. For that whatever is fine. For now, yeah. We can only enjoy this much. Or we shall rather enjoy this much. That's good enough. Anyways. Also, there is like a huge issue. I don't have really enough damage for this type of rounds. Like, I'm way too high to have so little damage. My HP is also quite low, but it's fine. That much is also fine, I guess. It's part of the experience or something like that. But yeah, I don't know. I haven't talking way too much, so I can tell you this much. It's quite funny how you tend to forget about everything else once you go so much only about one thing. So I guess I should. I haven't really found a proper method. I can only guess so far that staying silent is in any way useful for that, but I'm not really sure that it is so. Who knows actually what works the best to refocus? But yeah, let me. I guess. Fuck! Let me. Can I get any kind of upgrade? Defense. Movement speed, crit chance. HP. Move speed. No. I don't know. I don't want any upgrade, I guess. Yeah, let me hire it basically. Hire it and stretch and whatnot. Oh yeah, I never knew I could be so incredibly, what's the word? Cramped. Cramped? Yeah, full of cramps, rather. That much is actually surprising. Yeah. Uh, Actually, I didn't even know my throat hurt so much. Not hurt, but yeah, something odd getting deep into the night. And probably, I actually do remember saying something about that. When it gets too cold, my voice completely gets destroyed thanks to my throat, or yeah, gets destroyed thanks to that. It's part of the experience, I guess. It's part of the buff of being here so late at night, I guess. Uh, Receive only uncommon cards. Actually, I want to do one run with this. I think it's going to be trash, but we ought to try this. But yeah, I don't know. Anyways, the point is, and yeah, I am still quite surprised. There are so many other things still around. There are so many other notions. There is way too much stuff to try to learn about. That much I can accept. It's surprising to see the degree of media that still one has to consume and similar. And so, yeah, I think the very first round is always like an epic upgrade or something like that. And unlike that one, unlike the normal first rounds, this already started with a not epic upgrade, so that is kinda bad, actually. This is the fifth round, yeah. This is actually not even remotely close to a good hat, I feel like. I don't know. It might have its particular usages, but I don't like it myself. I prefer either the Challenger hat or the normal hat. But yeah, continuing. And I don't know, for now, I guess the only thing that I have been thinking about is perhaps it's so difficult. I try to talk out of that, but anyways, the actual actions themselves that lead to the desired results and whatnot is challenging anyways. It's not really all that achievable. It's too much friction always has to be present, and I don't encounter it being present as something really that desirable in any way. Life, yeah, the common talk is always, you know what, you don't have to work for the things that you want and such, and it's all fine, I guess, but after all, don't you really want to do stuff? Don't you really? Certain goals do deserve a lot of attention and a lot of trial and error behind them. So, isn't it worth it to actually have the capacity to go for that? But yes, at the same time, this is where I truly wanted to go in that sense. the message doesn't really lie there. You don't really hear people say, yeah, you know what, we have to spend a lot of time achieving our goals and whatnot. Sadly, it is somewhere else entirely. So, to continue believing in that, like, the eternal promise of change is always around the corner. So, it's much easier to just stay a believer of, no, you know what? You have to really change anything. You have to just trust that this will somehow this different avenue, rather, will be the one that does it basically for you, instead of what you know will really be effective. And because we are bound to be so influenceable, to return to what one should want, let's say, comes with the cost. I don't think it is exactly a cost. It simply is the reality. Yeah, it's basically hard to have that difficult, quite absent to see it occur naturally. In most cases, you'd want to think about that. So, I will instead pursue this other desire of mine, and maybe it's it's a middle ground between what I was saying before of getting to change your mind and whatnot. There is also something about the whole aspect of, but you might actually want to also, to some degree, come to the realization that you don't really need to remove what you want to. You just have to be capable of admitting that, yeah, this thing that I want does necessitate itself this much effort, this much attention, this much certain something. And the eternal promises of the rest of the world become more tempting the longer you remain there. I don't. Yeah. The eternal question of the grass looking greener on the other side is basic enough, but sadly it also is like realistical enough. It doesn't really have any kind of doubts to it in terms of. Sadly, yeah, I do forget that not always the grass is much greener on the other side. So, to convince myself that it really is not the case takes time. And once again, that's not what we tend to predicate around here. The sayings aim to a different place. The notions that we utilize and the conversations that we tend to have are all founded on different things, not really on that particular side of life. So yeah, it's fine, but you are going to constantly be told that it isn't really. So, life. But, anyways, doesn't make it any less enjoyable, I guess, yeah. And for now, anyways, that is still quite good. So, even if it comes with those other challenging sides to it, it's good enough. It's nice to have those difficulties along the way, after all. Not from the sense of, wow, hardships creates character or whatever, but from the more basic side of, if it's sort of unavoidable, then what am I really gonna do over here? Struggling so hard about things that I know won't change, no matter how much I want to struggle about them, basically. So, it's bound to be like that. I will wake up 1,000 times and say, no, this is not what I want. But to remind oneself what is really meaningful is much better, much more useful, simply. Much more meaningful. And that is also, I mean, yeah, just when they read, it is very much still the same notion as what I said before, in terms of philosophy and whatnot. If you get to have the possibility of realizing what you truly want and such, then you also get to have the possibility in the chance in your hands of encountering what is it that you truly desired at all, in terms of having that conversation yet again with yourself. Because otherwise, you're going to simply believe that no, I haven't identified really what matters now. In a moment of, when I use the language of weakness, it simply is. I get presented with a more tempting option in the very moment, because I haven't thought about it at all. But the moment in which I have to sit down and dedicate myself to analyze what it is that I am getting presented with, then it is that I finally get to realize it is an option, but not one which I really care for, so I don't require to remain with this choice in front of me. It's not my necessity, basically. So yeah, the world is quite an interesting place. Even nowadays, it's quite nice to have the possibility, the option of going for that journey more than any other thing. So yeah, I don't know. Life as an experience worth going through. I guess something like that. Yeah. But well, as I said before also, I don't know, for now, trying to also have in mind all of those other projects and such is still quite challenging. It's there are so many things that remain in that eternal side of, well, you know what, if we simply act like all of this is not really that meaningful, that important and whatnot, and just continue onwards, we can ignore some necessary factors, but otherwise, if you can finally dedicate yourself to those things that you know must be present, must occur and such, then at some point you will finally realize, fuck, not exactly that I missed, but simply unavoidably that I need to have this be. And the longer you remain away from those realizations, the longer you can keep yourself convinced that that doesn't need to happen, and the longer you also remain away from them, the more whenever you have to look at the overall picture, the more you can allow yourself to see, but it might as well already be too late, so why even bother with this, the favorite language, I guess, of the common world in terms of, you don't have to worry about something that is beyond your time, is, if you are too late to something, you don't have to believe that you need to change anything about that. You might as well be correct about your lateness, so no need in any direction whatsoever to mention this thing. Again, it is whatever it is, so you are free to do whatever you want about that yourself. Don't insist so much on any other choice. Just remain strong about it yourself. And yeah, change is not necessary. And trying is not necessary either. But I know, yeah, I guess unavoidably the point is not that one. The point is, and unsurprisingly so, going for that other change is, fuck, way too hard, I guess, unavoidably. But meaningful, I wouldn't say it isn't meaningful, I wouldn't say so. But yeah, it's, as I said before, challenging in terms of time consuming, exhausting, and whatnot. But it's fun. Life gets to be more fun thanks to that at the very least, so why even get angry about that at this point? After all, it's rather more important to be challenged by stuff like this than to be challenged by something that you completely despise, you know? But well, I don't know. It's gonna be a last journey for now. And this is certainly going to be an interesting journey, to say the very least. I don't know, a surprising journey to also express it in that sense. I don't know, something out live. Never getting treated as something so interesting in any way whatsoever. But anyways, still being so when you actually get to encounter it with those things in mind. The presentation of the world most often than not makes it quite oblique. Not because that is the intention, but simply because sometimes we cannot truly do all that good of us at expressing what makes this entire universe that much more meaningful and such. Also, yeah, at this point I pretty much gave up on, properly speaking. I simply started whispering, so whatever. I guess this is going to be our final run because after all, my voice doesn't really have much more to offer for now. But it's all good, I guess. It's part of the fun. Why not try at all, you know? But well, I don't know. Besides that, there is too much. Life is so overwhelming, brother. There are too many things to look forward to. There are too many things to hope for and such. So, while we try to do so, while we try to remain on that plane, we have to admit, all of it is still full of that tincture which makes one feel amazed by this very simple revelation, I guess. So yeah, this whatever. But this whatever is anyways much more significant than any other thing that we get presented with. So, nothing to... I wasn't even trying to die, brother. Fuck. All of this is much more meaningful than any other thing which we don't even get presented with. So yeah, I guess that's it. Yeah. And now, what the fuck? I got an achievement? What do you get? We defeated the boss. Understandable enough. What else is there? Unlock all the stuffs? There is another boss? How is there actually another boss? What the fuck? Somehow that happens, yes. And there is one that is far more basic in terms of get every single upgrade. But yeah, for now we're done, I guess. Not much more to add. Here. Good evening. So yeah, as I was saying, basically, we're done. For now we're done. It was good enough. Yeah, I don't know. Perhaps tomorrow there is a stream, perhaps. We will see. For now, once again, thanks for everything. Thanks for the time, the patience, the interest, the attention. All of that. It was good. As always, remember to take care, to hydrate, to rest, to do all of those things. We will see each other whenever we can. Take care, hydrate, rest, all of those things. And yeah, even if that doesn't happen, even if we don't get to see your suits next time, still remember to do your part. And yeah. Bye bye. Also sorry for that.